The knife in my hand hovered above the slice of roasted turkey, but my fingers froze mid-air. My father's voice, steady and cold, cut sharper than any blade in the room. "Tonight," he said, raising his glass, "I want to honor my only son, Michael." The entire table went silent. Forks clinked, someone coughed nervously, and my chest burned like I'd swallowed fire. His words rang in my ears, cruel and deliberate, erasing me in front of everyone I loved. My younger brother Michael's smile widened, smug, as if he'd just been crowned prince of the family. My mother's eyes darted to me, but she stayed quiet, her lips trembling against the rim of her wine glass. I couldn't breathe. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't some slip of the tongue. My dad had looked right at me, his eldest son, his firstborn, and declared me a ghost. I felt every gaze on me, uncles shifting awkwardly, cousins whispering, Michael trying to mask his grin. My fists clenched, nails digging so deep into my palm I almost drew blood. And then Dad leaned back, his chair creaking under his weight, and delivered the final blow. "From this night on, I only have one son. The rest don't belong here." The room spun. The air tightened. Rage boiled in my veins like gasoline begging for a match. And that's when I said something that made the entire table stop breathing. "My name is Daniel Carter. I'm 24 years old, born and raised in Houston, Texas, the first child of Robert and Elaine Carter. For most of my life, I thought we were a normal American family. We went to church on Sundays, we barbecued on the 4th of July, and we smiled for pictures at Christmas. But behind those photographs was a fracture no camera could catch. My father always favored Michael. It wasn't subtle. When Michael struck out at Little League, Dad clapped louder than the coach. When I hit the winning run, Dad barely glanced up from his phone. When Michael got into fights at school, Dad laughed it off. Boys will be boys. But when I got one detention for talking back to a teacher, Dad grounded me for a month. Still, I kept trying. I studied hard, got into college, worked part-time jobs to pay my way. I wanted him to be proud. I wanted him to see me. But every time, Michael got the spotlight, and Michael knew it. He used it. The weeks before that family dinner were a storm I didn't see coming. One evening, I got home late from work at the auto shop, smelling of grease and sweat. Mom was washing dishes, the kitchen quiet except for the hum of the dishwasher. She gave me that look, soft, worried, like she always did when she had news she didn't want to share. "Your dad's changing his will," she whispered, glancing toward the living room where Dad sat watching TV. I froze. "What do you mean?" She lowered her voice. "He's leaving everything to Michael. The house, the business, even the land your granddad left him." My stomach dropped. "But I'm his eldest. He always had the family shop." "I know." Her eyes welled up, but she shook her head. "I can't stop him." That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to Michael laughing in the next room while playing video games Dad had bought him. My mind twisted with betrayal. It wasn't about money. It was about erasure. Dad wasn't just pushing me aside. He was wiping me out of the family's future. The family dinner was supposed to be about celebrating Mom's birthday. The house smelled of roasted garlic, cornbread, and sweet potatoes. Relatives filled the dining room, laughter bouncing off the walls. I'd even wrapped Mom a necklace I'd saved up for months to buy. But Dad turned it into something else. Michael strutted around in his designer jacket, bragging about his new job. One dad had pulled strings to get him. I tried to focus on Mom, to keep the night about her. I sat by her side, poured her wine, cracked little jokes to make her smile. But then Dad stood, cleared his throat, and gave that toast. The toast that lit the match. The room was still waiting for me to react. My pulse thundered in my ears, sweat sliding down the back of my neck. Michael's smug grin widened, as if daring me to speak. Dad sipped his wine, unbothered, like he hadn't just torn me out of existence. That's when I leaned forward, my voice low but sharp enough to slice through the silence. "Careful, Dad," I said. "You just buried the wrong son." The table erupted in gasps. Mom's hand shot out to grab mine, trembling. Michael's face fell, color draining from his cheeks. And Dad Dad just glared at me, his jaw tight, his knuckles white against the stem of his glass. But inside me, something had already snapped, something that could never be undone. Because from that moment on, I wasn't just Daniel Carter, the forgotten son. I was a storm my father never saw coming. And the first strike of my revenge was already in motion the moment those words left my mouth. You just buried the wrong son. The room tilted on its axis. Michael slammed his fork onto the table. What the hell's that supposed to mean? He snapped, his voice cracking louder than he meant. Mom whispered, Daniel, please, tugging at my sleeve, but I pulled away. Dad didn't blink. He leaned back, crossed his arms, and studied me the way a judge sizes up a criminal before sentencing. It means, he said calm as stone, you've finally shown your true colors. My blood boiled. My true colors? Dad, you erase me like I'm nothing, like I don't exist. He shrugged. Sometimes the truth hurts. The gasps, the whispers, the uncomfortable shifting around the table. It was like the entire family was watching a trial unfold live. Only this time, I wasn't the one on trial. Dad was, but he didn't flinch. Michael is the future of this family, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. He's the one who'll carry our name forward. You've been nothing but a disappointment. You think because you fix a few cars and pay your own rent, you're owed something? Life doesn't work like that. I stood so fast my chair screeched against the hardwood. A disappointment? I said, my voice breaking. I put myself through school. I've worked since I was 16. I've earned everything I have. Michael? He rides your coattails and you call him a man. Michael shoved back his chair. Don't talk about me like that. He jabbed a finger at me. You're just jealous. Dad loves me because I'm not a screw-up like you. The room went wild. Cousins whispering, and Aunt telling us to stop, Mom burying her face in her hands. But I couldn't stop now. The truth had been rotting in my chest for years, and it was spilling out like poison. You're not a man, Michael, I said, my voice low, steady. You're a fraud. And deep down, Dad knows it too. That's why he has to keep saying you're his only son. Because he's scared if he looks at me too long, he'll see what he threw away. Michael's face turned red. He lunged at me across the table. Glasses toppled, plates shattered, Mom screamed. Chairs scraped back as relatives scrambled out of the way. He swung at me, but I caught his wrist midair. Years of working on engines, tightening bolts, and lifting heavy parts had built strength I never bragged about. I twisted his arm, and he cried out, his smug grin gone, his voice a panicked squeal. Enough! Dad roared, slamming his fist on the table so hard the silverware rattled. His face was crimson, veins bulging in his forehead. Daniel, you're no son of mine. The words cut deeper than a blade. My chest hollowed out, leaving nothing but rage and heartbreak swirling inside. I released Michael's arm, shoving him back into his chair. He clutched his wrist and glared at me with watery eyes, muttering curses under his breath. I stood there, my breathing ragged, everyone watching me like I'd set the house on fire. And then Dad leaned forward, his voice low, dangerous. Walk out that door, Daniel. Tonight, and don't ever come back. Mom gasped. Robert, no, you can't. I can, he growled. And I just did. Silence. The kind that strangles you. I looked around the table, at the faces of people I'd grown up with, people who'd shared birthdays, holidays, laughter. No one said a word. Not one uncle, not one cousin, not even Mom. It hit me like a wrecking ball. I was already erased. So I grabbed my jacket, pushed past the stunned relatives, and stormed out the door. But what Dad didn't know, what Michael couldn't imagine, was that I wasn't walking away defeated. I was walking away armed with something none of them knew I had. A secret, one that could burn the entire Carter family empire to the ground. The night air outside felt colder than it should have been. My breath steamed as I walked down the driveway, my heart pounding so hard I swore the neighbors could hear it. Behind me, laughter and chatter slowly picked back up inside, as if my exile had already been scrubbed from memory. I gripped my car keys, so tight the metal bit into my palm. My father had cast me out, Michael had humiliated me, and my family, my so-called blood, had sat there in silence. But I wasn't leaving empty-handed, because months earlier, while working late at Dad's auto shop, I'd stumbled across something, a black leather binder tucked inside the locked filing cabinet in his office. I never should have had the key, but when you're the son who stays late to close up, you learn where the spares are hidden. Inside that binder were bank statements, receipts, and invoices, hundreds of thousands of dollars funneled through fake names and shell companies. And they weren't just shady business deals. They were illegal, fraud, tax evasion, crimes that could put my father behind bars and bankrupt the Carter name forever. At the time, I told myself to forget it, to leave it alone. I thought maybe, if I worked harder, if I proved myself, Dad would see me. I didn't want to destroy him. I just wanted him to love me. But tonight, he'd erase me. And suddenly, that binder wasn't just evidence. It was a weapon. I drove through the empty streets of Houston, headlights bouncing off shuttered storefronts. My mind was a storm, memories crashing into each other. Dad refusing to come to my high school graduation because Michael had a big game the same night. Dad laughing at Michael's stupid jokes while ignoring mine. Dad patting Michael's back, calling him champ, while I stood in the shadows. And then Mom's face tonight, her silence cutting me deeper than Dad's words ever could. Tears blurred my vision, but I didn't wipe them away. I let them fall, burning down my cheeks, feeding the fire growing inside. Fine, I whispered into the empty car. If he doesn't want me as his son, I'll make sure the world knows what kind of man he really is. The next morning, I walked into the auto shop like nothing had happened. Michael was there, feet up on Dad's desk, sipping a soda he probably hadn't paid for. He smirked when he saw me. Well, look who decided to show up, he sneered. Didn't Dad tell you to disappear? I ignored him, walked past, and headed straight for the office. He followed, blocking the doorway. You don't get to come in here anymore. This is Dad's place. My place. I met his eyes. Steady. Move. He chuckled, leaning closer so his breath reeked of sugar and arrogance. Or what? You'll cry again? You'll beg Daddy to take you back? I smiled. Slow. Dangerous. Or I'll show the IRS what's his files. Michael froze. The color drained from his face. What files? He stammered. I tilted my head. Guess you don't know everything, little brother. I brushed past him, grabbed the binder from his hiding place, and slid it into my backpack. Michael stood there, pale and shaking, his cockiness crumbling right in front of me. For the first time in years, I had the upper hand. That night, my phone buzzed. It was Mom. Daniel, honey, can we meet? Her voice was shaky, almost desperate. I met her at a diner off the freeway, the kind with sticky booze and fluorescent lights that buzzed overhead. She looked tired, her makeup smudged, her hands trembling around her coffee cup. Your father's furious, she said. Michael told him you said something about files. I leaned back, arms crossed. Yeah, because I have them. Her eyes widened in fear. Daniel, please, don't do this. Whatever your father has done, exposing him will destroy everything. The shop, the house, our family. I laughed bitterly. Our family? He destroyed that last night. Tears welled up in her eyes. You don't understand. He didn't just cut you out because of Michael. There's more. Things you don't know. My chest tightened. Like what? She hesitated, glanced around the diner like someone might be listening, then leaned in close. Your father, she whispered, isn't your father. The world stopped. The buzzing lights, the clinking dishes, the chatter of truckers in the next booth, all of it blurred into nothing. What? I choked out. Her hands shook so badly the coffee spilled over the rim of her cup. I want to tell you years ago, but he made me swear never to. Daniel, you're not his son. The words echoed in my skull like church bells at midnight. You're not his son. I stared at Mom across the diner table, my mouth dry, my hands numb. Say it again, I whispered. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Daniel, I'm so sorry. I should have told you sooner. But Robert, he made me swear. He said if I ever told you, he'd take Michael and leave me with nothing. My stomach twisted. The ground under my feet felt like quicksand. So what? I'm some bastard kid you brought home, and you just raised me out of pity? She shook her head, gripping my hand desperately. No, don't you ever say that. You are mine, my son. I loved your real father. He was kind, gentle, but he died before you were born. And Robert, he stepped in. He promised he'd raise you like his own. A bitter laugh escaped me. Raise me like his own? He spent 24 years reminding me I'm not good enough. Now it makes sense. I wasn't his blood. That's why he erased me. Daniel, please, Mom begged. Don't use those files. Don't destroy him. You'll be destroying yourself, too. You'll lose the only family you have left. I pulled my hand away, my voice ice. No, Mom. He's the one who destroyed it. And Michael? He's not my brother. He's just a spoiled son of the man who's been lying to me my whole life. Her face crumpled, and for a split second, I almost softened. But then I remembered the dinner table, Dad's words, Michael's smirk, the silence of everyone else. And the fire inside me roared back to life. The next evening, I stormed into the Carter house without knocking. Dad was in his recliner, watching the game, beer in hand. Michael lounged on the couch, scrolling his phone. They both looked up when I entered, Michael sneering instantly. What are you doing here? Didn't Dad tell you? Shut up. I snapped, my voice sharper than I intended. Dad muted the TV, his jaw tightening. I told you never to set foot in this house again. I stepped closer, pulling the leather binder out of my bag and tossing it onto the coffee table. It landed with a heavy thud, pages spilling slightly from the sides. Recognize that? I asked. Michael's eyes widened. Dad's face drained of color, though he tried to mask it with a scowl. You went through my things, he growled. I leaned in. You went through my life. So now we're even. Michael picked up the binder, flipping through it, his lips parting as he read. Dad, this could put you away. Shut it, Michael. Dad barked, snatching it back. I folded my arms. Here's the deal. Either you admit what you are, to the family, to everyone, or I walk this binder right over to the IRS office downtown. They'd love to see how Robert Carter built his little empire. For the first time in my life, I saw fear in my father's eyes. Real fear. But before he could answer, Michael laughed. Loud, mocking, cruel. You think you've got the upper hand, Danny boy? You don't know Jack. He leaned forward, grinning ear to ear. Dad's not the only one with secrets. I froze. What are you talking about? Michael's grin widened. Ask Mom. Ask her what really happened to your real father. The one you think was some saint. My blood went cold. I whipped around to face Dad, whose jaw clenched, eyes dark with something he wasn't saying. Don't, he warned Michael through gritted teeth. But Michael just smirked. Why not? He wants the truth, doesn't he? He turned back to me, his voice dripping with venom. Your real daddy? He didn't die in some accident. He was murdered. And guess who helped cover it up? The room spun. My knees almost buckled. You're lying, I whispered. But Dad's silence, Dad's refusal to deny it, was louder than any confession. The word murder ricocheted around the living room like a bullet. I stared at Dad, my chest heaving, my pulse slamming in my ears. Tell me he's lying. I demanded, my voice breaking. Tell me Michael's just running his mouth. Dad's jaw flexed. He didn't speak, didn't blink, didn't move. And in that silence, I had my answer. Rage flooded me, hot and violent. I grabbed the binder from the coffee table and hurled it across the room. Papers exploded into the air like confetti, raining down over the carpet, the couch, the beer can rolling off Dad's lap. You murdered him? I shouted, my throat raw. My real father? The man who should have been raising me. Michael smirked, loving every second of my unraveling. Didn't you ever wonder why nobody talks about him? Why Mom shuts down whenever his name comes up? He leaned back, spreading his arms. Now you know. Shut your damn mouth. Dad roared, but his voice cracked, not with power, but with panic. I spun on him, my voice shaking with fury. What did you do to him? Dad slammed a fist on the armrest, veins bulging in his neck. He was a fool. He was weak. He had no future. Elaine was going to waste her life raising you with him, and I... His breath hitched. He stopped himself. You what? I pressed, stepping closer. His eyes burned into mine, wild, unhinged. I gave you a life, a name, a roof over your head. You think you'd have made it with that pathetic excuse for a man? I did what needed to be done. For all of us. The words sucked the air right out of the room. Michael laughed again, a cruel, high-pitched sound. Hear that, Danny? Your hero wasn't just erased. He was erased by your new daddy. How's that for family loyalty? I lunged at him, grabbing his collar, slamming him against the wall so hard the frames rattled. You knew? I hissed. You knew all this time? Michael grinned in my face. Of course I knew. Dad tells me everything. I'm his real son. For a second, I saw red. My hands tightened around his shirt. I wanted to crush the smirk right off his face. But then I saw Mom's face in my head. Her tears. Her begging me not to destroy everything. I let him go, shoving him hard enough that he stumbled. I'm not like you, I said, my voice low, shaking with restrained fury. I don't need to be Robert Carter's son to matter, but he's going to pay. Both of you are. I turned to leave, but Dad's voice stopped me cold. You won't go to the cops, he said, his tone steady again, like he'd found his footing. Because if you do, Elaine goes down with me. I froze in the doorway. What? Dad smirked now, cruel and confident. Your mother knew. She helped cover it up. If I burn, she burns too. Think about that before you play hero, son. The word son felt like acid in my ears. I walked out without looking back, the night swallowing me whole. My hands shook as I gripped the steering wheel, my mind spinning with everything I had just heard. My father, a murderer. My mother, an accomplice. My brother, a smug little vulture feeding off their lies. And me? I wasn't just a forgotten son anymore. I was sitting on a powder keg of secrets that could obliterate us all. But as I drove into the darkness, one thing crystallized in my mind. If Dad thought I wouldn't use what I knew, if Michael thought he could keep grinning while I rotted in the shadows, they had no idea what was coming. Because I wasn't planning on turning them in to the cops. I was planning something worse. They came at dawn. Lights like small suns pulsed down our street. I was still half asleep on the couch in my one-bedroom apartment when the sound hit. The metallic bark of boots on concrete, the thud of a battering ram against our shop door, the sharp, official voices I'd only ever heard on TV. My phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I let it ring. I watched from my truck, engine idling, heart a drum in my ribs. Men in suits and badges moved to the Carter Auto lot, like a flock of crows, efficient and terrible. They cuffed Dad in the driveway, his face pale, mouth working as if he wanted to fight whatever words were coming but had none left. Michael shouted. He was already in handcuffs before he hit the pavement, still trying to flash that stupid grin. Mom sat on the back steps crying, hands pressed to her mouth, like she was trying to keep her own voice in. I could have walked inside. I could have put my hands on my head and let them take me, too, and maybe told the whole story under fluorescent lights. But I hadn't done this for absolution. I had done it to break a kingdom built on lies. I watched, cold and steady, as the men peeled back years of careful paper. I had sent the binder. I had sent copies to the IRS, to a local investigative reporter with a reputation for digging up rot in the richest soil, and, most secretly, to a lawyer friend I had met at community college who owed me nothing and had everything to gain by doing the right thing. I had mailed the envelopes from 3 different locations, used throwaway phones for calls, and left a single, anonymous voicemail for the reporter. Look in the safe. Your story is there. But sending paperwork was only one part. Power moves come dressed in layers. I'd built the other pieces for months. A grainy recording of Dad's voice, drunk and unguarded, saying things he would never say sober. Access logs showing the shell companies. Bank transfers traced back to accounts in Robert Carter's name. I hadn't made anything up. Everything had teeth. They read Dad his rights on our cracked driveway as if he was some common criminal. I felt nothing when he looked at me. Not hatred. Something worse. Recognition. He saw the architect of his ruin and wore that looked like he knew the price before he'd paid it. They took him and Michael and rifled through the shop with a hunger that emptied the place out. The men moved like they believed they were cleaning up a public hazard. They took computers, ledgers, the big ledger that had lived in Dad's locked drawer for 20 years. They photographed the office, the safe, the framed certificates Dad had pasted up to make this little empire look solid. They took my father into the back of a van, and Mom sank to the concrete and started to wail. The reporter arrived the next day, hair still messy from a long drive, eyes bright with the thrill of the hunt. He had questions, the kind that dragged truth out of hiding. He sat across from me in a sticky diner booth, pen poised, and asked things I already knew the answers to. "Who gave you this?" he asked, tapping his pad. I shrugged, watched a droplet of coffee tremble on the lip of my cup. "A son who finally got tired of being invisible," I said. He smiled like he liked that line. "And why now?" "Because secrets rot," I answered. "Because families built on lies eat the children who try to fix them. Because there's a difference between making a life and stealing one." He nodded, satisfied. The story ran the week after. The headline was merciless. It named shell companies, accountants, the alleged embezzlement, and significant phrases from Dad's drunken recording. It quoted anonymous sources, attached redacted bank statements, and, most devastatingly, printed a page in a ledger where Robert Carter had written his own initials beside transfers to pay off someone permanently. The piece cracked the Carter name down the middle. The law moved faster than I expected. Grand jury subpoenas and sealed indictments cut into our neighborhood's hum like a surgeon's scalpel. Michael's phone calls were recorded. Dad's alibi crumbled where it mattered. Paper matched handwriting. Handwriting matched ledgers. Ledgers matched transfers. My mother, terrified, finally talked. Not in a confession to me. God knows she never would. But to a prosecutor with immunity. She said what I already knew. She had lied, not because she wanted to, but because she was drowning and he was the rope she clung to. I visited her in the county hospital one evening after a long day of interviews and meetings I'd barely participated in. Her face was sharper now, framed by tubes in the hospital's pale light. She looked old in a way I'd never allowed myself to see before, old and exhausted with the weight of a long sleep she'd never been able to wake from. She took my hand like she was surprised it was still there. "I tried to protect you," she said, voice thin. "You helped hide a murder," I said. It wasn't an accusation. It was a statement I needed to get outside my chest. Her eyes filled with sorrow, but not surprise. "Yes," she whispered. "I thought if you knew, you'd forgive me. I thought if you knew, you'd see how much I loved you." "Love isn't a story you buy characters for," I said. "It's what you don't trade away." She reached for me, and for the first time since the family dinner, I let her. I let the grief land. She sobbed like a child, and I held her shoulder until the sound died. There was no magic fix. There was only the truth on the table like a clean, cold knife. The legal process dragged like winter. Dad fought. He hired high-priced lawyers and tried to paint me as a bitter son acting on a grudge. Michael's defense leaned on his youth, on his blind loyalty, on the lie that nepotism is not a crime but a misguided affection. The court of public opinion, however, is blunt. Sponsors abandoned the little charities bearing our name. The business lost contracts. Long-time customers, men who'd once toasted Robert Carter at the bar, crossed the street when my family walked toward them. Through all of that, I felt the vindication I thought I wanted and the emptiness I hadn't expected. My name was out there. Daniel Carter, the whistleblower, the son who took his family down. People in the grocery store glanced at me and then looked away. Neighbors I'd known since childhood kept their distance. My friends from the shop divided, some loyal to me, others too tied to their paychecks to mess with a scandal. The worst hit was my mother. Her testimony, her cooperating with prosecutors, saved me the courthouse theatrics of watching Dad twist in front of the jury with me on the stand. But she paid. Her reputation was gone. She became the woman who helped bury a man. People she'd known for decades stopped returning her calls. She moved into a small apartment with one box of pictures and a radio that played static half the time. On the day the indictment was handed down, Dad's face was a map of every ugly decision he'd ever made. He turned his head when he saw me in the hallway as they led him to the holding cell. For a second his eyes met mine, and maybe there was regret, or maybe that was only my hope trying to rewrite the past. Months later, in a courthouse packed with cameras and a crowd whispering like a summer storm, Robert Carter was convicted on charges that matched the pages I'd held in my hands. Michael's plea deal made him a footnote on the charge sheet. Conspiracy, perjury, a year on probation. He left town with a duffel bag and a face drained of color. Mom watched from the back row, small and indistinct, and when she caught my eye, she mouthed, "I'm sorry." I walked out of that courthouse, hollowed and heavy. The victory tasted like copper. I had burned the empire down. I had watched it unravel. I had hanged the lie in broad daylight and let its body rot for the world to see. But in the ash, there was no triumphant chorus. There was only silence and a long, thin ache where family used to be. A few months after everything ended, the indictments, the plea bargains, the paper trail finally drying up, I packed a bag. The town had eyes, and I had memories. I left Mom with money placed in an account she could access, and the knowledge that I'd done what I did because I could no longer live in a house of mirrors. I drove away the way I'd come into my life, alone, with the radio playing a song about roads and new beginnings, feeling both lighter and more broken than I'd ever imagined possible. Halfway down the highway, I stopped at a bridge that arched over a lazy river. The city was a smear behind me, little boxes of light. I leaned on the railing and watched the water carry leaves and small trash in a slow, honest current. The world went on. People loved and lied and left and tried again. I thought of Dad, sitting in a cell where he could no longer hide. I thought of Michael, slinking down some unfamiliar road. I thought of Mom, small and trembling, but alive. I thought of myself, the son who had been pronounced invisible, who had found a way to make himself seen. So I whispered into the dark, finishing a sentence I'd started at a table full of laughter and knives. I burned it down so the truth could breathe. The river took the words and moved them on. The air was cold. The future was uncertain. But for the first time in my life, the silence after the storm felt like a small kind of freedom.